new invention, right? Before you just had manuscripts. Like literally books are kind of his new invention. And then I'm sure there were some articles about how books were just taking everyone's attention. You know, people would just be in the books all the time, especially certain personalities.
Yeah, there was actually an ancient story about that. But hey, look, we're on the internet now talking.
Oh, keep going. Just go. Well, what's that story? You're jumping into a conversation we just started.
It's an old legend about somebody came to this king and said, look, I've invented a system for putting words on tablets. And the king was like, that's horrible. No one's ever going to remember anything ever again.
That's true. I mean, I'm always amazed at how much our memories have faded compared to some of the ancients I read about and what they would have to memorize.
Yeah. The Homer's works were never written down. They were passed down orally from storyteller to storyteller. That's how we have the Odyssey. You know.
Amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Anyways.
But here we are on the internet, rotting your brain for, as we do every Friday. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
We try to be enlightening. Welcome, crypto freaks. My name is Brett Musser. I work here at Edge, head of business development, or at least I tell myself sometimes, and content, so I write things up. And I'm also joined here by William Swanson, who is our architect, right? Kind of building the matrix, making sure our systems work and data is safe, secure, and has a lot of knowledge about crypto, keeping things safe, kind of the interface between the user and what they're using, and making it easy and accessible for all. So thanks for joining us, William, and taking time out of your day to enlighten us. So first of all, I want to talk about, I want to tell the audience that if you're watching on YouTube, type in the comments, and we'll be able to read them, or Pete will be able to toss them our way, and we'll be able to answer any question that you have, hopefully. But first order of business, we'll talk about our new release, which you and the engineers were hard at work.
I did participate in some coding.
Right? Walking through some things. So we actually onboarded an old partner, an old friend, an exchange out of Switzerland called Bity, which allows users to go in and out of Swiss francs and euros with no KYC. So that means know your customer, processes. So you don't have to give up your phone number, your any type of personal identifiable information.
So this actually is interesting because on our not Bitcoin or crypto traders, I think it was, one of those Reddits, we had the announcement that we had no KYC, and a bunch of people jumped on us like, but it's going through a bank, so they know who you are, which is kind of the point, right?
Yeah.
It's not like this is a no KYC super secret feature. It's more like you already have a bank account. The bank knows everything about you, especially in the European Union or any sort of westernized country. So why should we have to re-enter the driver's license and the identification and the address and all this stuff? The bank account number should be fully identification of anything that you care about.
No KYC does not imply anonymous.
Right.
But it does reduce your footprint and increase your privacy that you wouldn't get on other platforms.
Yeah, so it's basically the perfect user experience. You just enter your bank account information, send the money, and it shows up in your crypto wallet with no other additional friction. And yet it's still fully, within those boundaries what we would consider to be legal. And
keep in mind, this is for our European users, so if you have a European bank account, you can use this, but Bity does not service other parts of the world. Also, I think in this release, speaking of memory, we kind of reduced or optimized what the memory consumption of the application on the device. Maybe a few words on that, maybe the little technical details for people that are interested.
So Edge kind of has two parts to it. Mm-hmm. We have the part that you see, the buttons, the interface, and all that sort of thing. And then we have a separate component that's running off on the side, which is our core. Mm-hmm. And what we found was, ever since we split the two parts into two, phones were actually killing the core of the app. Like they would actually shut it down because they were seeing, it's taking a lot of memory, it's taking a lot of resources, and it's not actually showing anything to the user.
Gotcha. And this wasn't a problem for a lot of our newer users, but definitely for some of our older power users that have been using these networks and our application a lot, they were seeing slowdowns and crashes.
You have a lot of transactions, and if you have an older phone, perhaps, you may or may not have encountered this particular problem. Mm-hmm. And the solution was just to reduce the memory usage, just make that core part a little bit leaner, a little bit lighter. We have more to do, but I think it's a good starting point, and hopefully it alleviates a lot of those problems.
Okay, cool. So covered this release, and I wanted to talk about, in the title we put up kind of inevitability of crypto, and I chose that because I see a lot of the language from the traditional powers that be, their financial or academic, and this is globally, not just maybe in the U.S., but the U.S. is part of it, kind of accepting cryptocurrencies and digital money as inevitable and using that language. And I took that word from a sitting, chairman of a section of the Federal Reserve System. So I think he's the chairman of the Philadelphia Fed,
Oh, wow.
Patrick Harkman or something. And I think you would like Patrick Harkman because he has a pretty extensive engineering background as well, and kind of economics, finance. Definitely an impressive establishment figure, not in the press, but like he's running the Philadelphia Fed.
There's the flashy people, and then there's the hardworking.
Definitely,
Cogs in the machine.
Yeah. He was like president of the University of Delaware, but he was. They were talking about kind of the future of money at this conference. He was talking about, and that he thought it was inevitable that some central bank out there, and he wasn't saying that the Fed would do it, and he wouldn't support the Fed doing this first, but he seems to see a lot of incentive for another central bank to issue a digital currency, right? And coming from, I guess, when you started Airbits and kind of where I first got into digital currencies, like just using that type of language is huge.
It's kind of crazy, actually. I mean, when you think about it, though, if you really step back and take the mile-long view, you kind of see dollars are digital currencies, right? I don't typically pull bills out of my pocket. I'm typically swiping a credit card, and it's going to a bank that's an online establishment that I have a username and password with, but I don't have branches necessarily. And it's all been digital for years.
And I keep coming back to this because when I talk to the average person, the average young person, because I'm more around young people, their heuristic about being attached to fiat and away from digital currencies is a common comment is I can go to an ATM and get cash or a bank. And I think that is fundamentally right, as in like a good, like if you don't know anything about software or money or Bitcoin, you're like, well, at least I can turn this other thing into cash. And what it keeps coming back is like, if governments want to compete, I think they need to keep that physical component, because as soon as it's like now you're going into Bitcoin land or crypto land and software and digital money. And I don't know if they'll be able to compete at the same level. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Like, for the average user, that's a big deal, making it material.
It's actually kind of funny because paper money started as a certificate for gold. Like, I've got my gold, but I'll take these dollar bills because I know I can go to the bank and get my gold back.
Yes,
right?
yeah. There was physicality to that. You can get something.
And now we're so abstracted from that it's like, I've got my money in my digital bank account, but as long as I can go get my paper, then that's better somehow.
Yeah, I know some of the central banks think they have to update, but I was thinking, what keeps a lot of people anchored to it is they really do think it's real, and it is real in the sense is I can make it into something. If I know nothing, I'm still a little kid, I can bring it into something I can hold and feel and touch.
But I think there is a valid concern about the way dollars work, or the way that whole system is wired, right? Banks trusting other banks to do overnight lending, and all the way the intricate financial machinery that allows digital dollars to exist without a blockchain. Mm-hmm. All of that complexity goes away, right? It's not like you're undigitizing the dollar. The dollar is digital and it has been digital for years, but now we're optimizing the connectivity between banks and between different institutions to just really make it, here's the ledger for the dollar system. Users like you and I probably will never touch that ledger. Banks will, but at least now it's public and that we'd have like less trust needed.
Now, that assumption that banks will touch it might be true, but I don't know if we're going to need if the Fed or some other central bank is running this digital infrastructure, how much are commercial banks needed after that?
I can see. I'm just trying to be pragmatic about this, and the way that I could see this actually happening in an actual country. I agree. The end game is that everybody just does it individually with their own wallets, right? But I could see a situation where the Fed now says, okay, our overnight lending window, or whatever it is, whatever institutions we have within our federal government or our central bank, now if a bank wants to get access to that, they have to go through our digital blockchain-based system. So now it starts at the central bank, and then now the banks are now talking to that system. And the banks are still keeping the same credit card, same user experience with their customers. And that just sort of trickles out, right? Now it's from the Fed to the bank to get that liquidity. Now it's from the bank to other institutions. Now it's from other institutions finally down to the consumer. So it kind of expands outward from that.
Yep. Yeah. That layering in between. But now I'm wondering if they actually do in cryptocurrencies maybe force the issue on central banks to update their stuff, that I think a lot of their citizens might be able to get direct banking and payment services from the government themselves.
Right, well, you wouldn't need all these intermediaries, right? You've got Visa, MasterCard, your local bank branch that you go to talk to this stuff. That kind of becomes less important as you have the digital stuff.
So what I'm getting at here is that digital currencies lit the fire under their ass enough to maybe there might be making systems in the future that a lot of these commercial banks, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, or other third-party intermediaries become redundant within the system itself. That would be huge, and that would be a win. I mean, that'd be like that's huge that cryptocurrencies would kind of facilitate that extinction of the need for these rent-seeking.
But I can see it as being a long multi-step process. Because I mean, what does the Federal Reserve
It's true.
do?
I'm getting pie in the sky here.
What does the Federal Reserve do? I mean, if you're a bank and you need more liquidity, you can basically go to them and have them effectively print money out of thin air. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
because that's what their job is, right? They buy assets, and the money that they're buying them with is basically printed, and it's coming out of thin air. So as a consumer, I would not be able to have the Federal Reserve print me money out of thin air. I'm not worthy of the banking license to get that privilege.
Gotcha.
But there's still going to be, so to actually unwind that system layer by layer, it kind of comes down to either we have sound money or we don't. If we don't have sound money, then who are the privileged people who get to access that money printing capability?
Gotcha. Yeah. That was just a story about the Federal Reserve, and we're talking about the U.S., but there was also another story that just came out about, and it's hard, these are kind of happening in real time, so sourcing, like how good are these sources? But I have seen statements from the deputy finance minister from Russia. He kind of comes up in the cryptocurrency news every now and then, because they basically, there's a report that they are kind of grappling with. It's like cryptocurrencies are inevitable, right? And what's the framework in which we're going to classify and then regulate? And it looks like what people are reporting from the documents or statements from government officials in Russia, they seem to be breaking it down into 3 categories for cryptocurrencies. So the one would be maybe a utility token to access some software or resource. The other one would be money transacting, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, stuff like that. And then the third would be securities, right? So kind of getting ready for that whole mess. And then going across the world, or actually pretty close, depending on your perspective on the globe, to Japan, their Financial Services Authority also put out some similar language about how these there are going to be new financial entities that either hold like a basket of cryptocurrencies or new financial products that are related to the blockchain or crypto, and we need to set up guidelines. So it's like one of those things, all right, guys, this is going to happen. People are going to speculate on this and invest in this and use it. We need to understand what's going on, yada, yada, yada. Same old. And we were talking about last week in the Q&A, the PDVSA, which is a state-owned oil company of Venezuela, holds Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? So you just see this kind of inevitability wave come crashing down, especially in 2019 with like Libra and stuff like that. And it's like the whole cat is out of the bag.
I kind of see it. I agree with that. And it's actually really fascinating that these traditional guys are starting to actually realize what's happened. Because I think in blockchain, you kind of have this technology that allows us to have a ledger of who owns what, which is kind of the backbone of our whole modern society, in a more efficient manner. Right? You have less need for intermediaries, less need for trust in those intermediaries, and trust is expensive because if somebody violates that trust, it's very expensive. So you need like insurance and layers upon layers of just no, we can get rid of all those contingencies and just have the ledger be an efficient representation of what it needs to be.
Yeah, and that brings us to another. So we talked about in Russia, one of the categories was securitization, and securitization on blockchain. So issuing some debt or some equity tokens on them, and having these other networks handle settlement and allowing users to take custody of their assets, which is a big deal. Because the little bit that I do know about securities is there, and money in general, there's a lot of intermediaries charging fees, basically a lot of rent seeking, right? When things have metastasized for a bit, people get complacent, they're able to kind of set up shop and then not really change things. And it's like, if you don't have enough money, sorry, like you can't deal with it.
I own stock in a company, or my wife does. She had it from before we got married, and we don't actually own the stock. We have an account at a brokerage firm.
And they don't even hold it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we talked about, maybe cashing it out at some point. And we're like, this procedure is like, we got to tell the custodian to tell the custodian to tell the other people to like, look, it's like, this is ridiculous. Like, we don't actually have this. It's just a... Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so going on that point. So
but if I could just have a token that was like, the stock and just put it in my digital wallet.
Yeah.
And you can get rid of that whole...
There's risk with that, but then we also get in the issue of programmability, which someone like you has an appreciation for, which I think a lot of people in finance might not appreciate or can't understand how you could set up like a distributed custody system or reduce our dependence on these intermediaries.
Well, I mean, there's kind of two ways to work it. One is to say, I want a custodian like a Coinbase to hold the digital token for me that represents the stock. So now we've taken 3 or 4 levels of intermediaries and just turned it down to one, who's just the custodian of the crypto, and the crypto itself is the thing.
Yep.
And then if you wanted to go the last step, go to Edge, hold your own keys in your own wallet. You are now your own custodian, and perhaps there's a 1.5, like a halfway between, where you have multi-sig, Coinbase holds one key, you hold the other, or some company like that.
I think that is that seems to be the future, because each of those models have their cost and benefits, right? Pros and cons. You can make a case for why you would want to hold custodially, but you could also talk about the risk that you take on by giving up your crypto.
So we take 5 layers of custodianship or 6 layers and reduce it down to 1 maximum, or 0, or anywhere in between
0.5,
that you can set, the customizable slider.
Yeah, so in getting on the kind of the securities bandwagon, Morningstar, which is a big ratings agency in the traditional finance world and has really kind of come into its own over the last 10 years. And there's usually been like 3 or 4, but they're definitely up there. And people do respect a lot of the research they put out. They've been, or at least they're moving in the direction of rating some securities that are issued on these platforms. So there's some type of debt instruments or equity instruments that might float on Ethereum or maybe Ravencoin or some other blockchain that they represent. And they're like, hey, we'll be willing to kind of give our rating on that.
Oh, that's exciting, because typically the big ratings agencies like the Standards & Poor or whatever, they'll look at company debt, corporate debt, and say, oh, well, we don't rate this very high because they have not very good profits and they're not looking so sharp, or maybe this company has really good position, and so yes, that's a good debt instrument to buy. But now they're taking these little crypto startups as if they were these big companies saying, we're going to rate your stock too, or your debt too. Yeah,
I mean, debt instruments are smart contracts, so to speak, but they've been mediated by like you said, like a long chain of intermediaries. And now it's like, hey, we have these new tools, and they might not be perfect, but we can make it better than the old system. And that's usually the criteria for most things. It's like, if you're looking for perfection, you're going to be very disappointed.
Well, really, what you need is a marginal improvement, right?
Exactly.
If it's 1% better than everything else everyone else is doing, you're going to make money off of that 1%.
Yeah, and I would also say I'm in the camp of like, this blockchain stuff and the securitization is interesting, but it's an efficiency gain, where something like Bitcoin and Ethereum, Litecoin, a lot of the money stuff is a paradigm shift.
And that's actually something you say this inevitability, and I think it is inevitable that this technology would be accepted by the powers that be simply because it is a better technology. But when I got involved in Bitcoin, there was this social ideal of sound money.
Yep.
sound asset ownership, all these things that we kind of lost when we went to fiats in the first place. And I feel like the new efficiency gain version of blockchain that's applied to traditional monies is not going to achieve those goals.
No.
Because it's just the same old dollar that's still printed by the Federal Reserve. Just now it's more efficiently transmitted from point A.
I'm with you. I think we're more energized by that. But there's definitely people that are practitioners in the financial markets do appreciate something that doesn't smash the system and makes their whatever they're doing, I guess, a little more efficient. And also, I'd also point out the cutting down of middlemen or transaction costs to issue a security or some type of debt or equity instrument. And once you cut that down, you definitely lower the bar and scale at which you have to operate to issue those instruments. So right now it might cost you like $150,000 to issue some type of security, and if you can reduce those costs, you can have more people that have access to capital markets.
So it might be a more egalitarian dollar in the sense more people can participate, but it's still centralized and controlled by it.
It could be, yeah.
But something like a Monero, which is completely independent of any existing financial system, it's kind of like, well, how do you fit that in?
Mm-hmm.
I can see it being inevitable as an upgrade of technology, but to have this whole other thing on the side, I'm not sure if that's inevitable.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that's worth being aware of and making informed decisions about. Like, do I choose to use Libra, something made by a central company that's very much regulated, or do I choose to use something like a Bitcoin or a Bitcoin Cash that's not? And where do I set my allegiance when I go to use these new systems as I go forward?
Speaking of Bitcoin Cash, let's get into some more heavy technical developments that we were kind of talking about the old world and what's going on there. I always think that's interesting to get their perspective on it, and what they're doing. But we also are in this own kind of crazy world. Like, we're moving way past that speed, and all these coins have a million different things going on. But today we're going to talk about what Bitcoin Cash is trying to do. And I guess the end result for a user like yourself would be instant confirmations. So you'd get you get high assurances, even though a block hasn't been mined. You would be able to kind of reduce the likelihood of some type of double spend happening.
So this is the part of
I'm going to let William go off on this.
Podcast where I got to make everybody mad. Okay. We're going to make BTC people mad because we're talking about Bitcoin Cash.
I like to trigger everyone.
I'm going to make BTC people mad by comparing this to Ripple, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll probably make Ripple people mad because we just talked about them in comparison to another coin.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm joking, of course. There's a lot of...
jokes always have a little truth to it.
There's a lot of upset in these communities.
So let's talk about instant confirmations and how things kind of work. Let's back up and how things kind of work with consensus and confirmations right now.
So it kind of all comes back down. When Satoshi first released Bitcoin, the very first email somebody wrote back to him replying to his announcement of, hey, I've got this new system, was actually a criticism. Yeah, that's cute, but it's not going to scale. There's no way this is going to handle the world's level of transactions. And Satoshi's answer was, well, let's do a calculation. How many transactions does Visa handle? How many megabytes is that? And what does that do to our size of our blocks? And, computer network can theoretically handle that. And that's kind of his position, right? The original founder of Bitcoin's position. Well, fast forward 10 years, and we've realized the software he wrote is not capable of operating at those scales. Right? It's theoretically capable, like networks and hard drives are big enough. It's just that in practice it does not.
Yeah, and we got to separate. Satoshi made a system that worked, but it wasn't perfect and maybe optimized for the level that a lot of people want it to work at.
Right. So the Bitcoin BTC approach has been, okay, Satoshi's software is not capable of handling these volumes, and if we do try to operate at this scale, we run the risk of centralization, and because the software starts to break down, and we have miner centralization as a
and then you have less people that can kind of check up on the work of the miners. That's usually their kind of key concern.
Yeah. So their idea is, okay, Satoshi was wrong. His software doesn't work at that level. Therefore, we must simply build other systems on top, like Lightning.
Exactly.
Whereas the Bitcoin Cash approach is still descended from that same root, but their idea is, okay, the software doesn't do what it's supposed to do, therefore fix the software. Make changes at the protocol level that will allow it to actually work. And the fundamental problem is, over the course of 10 minutes, transactions are coming in, And then all of a sudden, bam, we have a block come out that confirms a bunch of those and says which ones won and which ones didn't.
So it's kind of like you have these large group of friends, and like say you're messaging each other, but you can only get messaged through every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? And between those 10 minutes, you're kind of in the dark, right?
Everyone's
Like you're just
yelling,
like,
but
yeah.
they can't hear each
And
other.
everyone's trying to mine the block with certain their transactions, right? So you have this kind of blackout period, and then all of a sudden, consensus.
Bam, and now you have like all these messages to process. You're like scrambling to process them. You can't keep up.
Yeah.
And then another like period of darkness.
Which it works, which is the thing that made Bitcoin amazing, but
It kind of so the solution.
there are optimizations that can be made, or there are developers that are trying to push these solutions forward.
So the solution actually to both problems is to simply allow progress to happen, right? Within that 10-minute period, people will broadcast transactions, people will listen to what's being broadcast, kind of come to some kind of an agreement so that when that 10-minute happens and we have that big proof of work block, it's not a surprise what got in. We know exactly what is going into that block.
So it's like, all right, we're able to talk with what proposal is that
So
you're
there's
talking
actually-
about?
So there's two proposals.
Two
There's
at
two-
the same time.
Yeah.
All right, so they're competing.
Right.
All right, this is what I love about crypto. Is the engineers can kind of, if you have an idea, you can kind of whip up a white paper and then turn it into code, and then there's robust discussion about which one we should go with, or maybe both. But anyways,
So
sorry.
the first one that I actually kind of like this one better is called Storm. And the idea is very simple. As miners are working to produce this big 10-minute block, they have to reach a certain level of difficulty, a certain hash with a certain level of goodness that's very, very rare. So you're like searching for a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
And as you do this search, you're going to find other hashes that are good,
But not good enough.
but not good enough. Like every 5 minutes, you'll find half as good of one as you need for that 10 minute. Every
Okay.
2 minutes, you'll find one that's about a quarter as good, right?
So good means like there was some work to
There
produce
was a
that
lot
hash.
of work, yeah, enormous amount of work, but just not that 10-minute level. So what if we start publishing some of those weaker blocks?
Okay.
They're not the full strength 10-minute, but the fact that somebody published it proves that they were doing proof of work and that they were in fact working on it.
So it makes them a more trustworthy party to communicate with. Is that part of the?
It's more like getting an insight into what's happening.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so you're
You
getting-
get those snapshots.
Yeah, so you could say even like once a second, miners are going to publish blocks. Whatever the best block is for that 1 second period, they're just going to publish it out and say, hey, world, this is what I was working on during the last second. And you, as an observer of this, can look at the different miners and say, okay, I see that I sent this transaction to my buddy, and half the miners are working it, therefore I say I have a 50-50 chance of it getting in. And as more and more miners accept it into their pools and start including in their blocks, you say, okay, that percentage is going up to 99%. Okay, I'm convinced all the miners are now working on this transaction and it's going to get in the next block. I don't even have to wait for the next block to come out because I know that they're all crunching on it.
So these are all kind of formal proofs that are beyond my understanding, and it would take some work to understand. But there's some type of, mathematical distribution that you can model out based on some of the inputs that are put in, like who's working on what for how long, how many of them are doing it. Right? Is that?
I mean, it's not even that complicated. It's like in order for someone to produce a block with a lot of work in it, they have to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
And if you can see them doing the work, it's like you're like, okay, I've hired this guy to dig me a ditch, and I can go and check on him, every couple minutes to see is he actually shoveling dirt or not.
Okay.
And if at the end, I could come back, hire you to dig a ditch, come back at the end of the day and say, is there a ditch there or not? Or I could check up on you every couple minutes. It's like you can see the work happening as it's progressing.
Got you. So that's Storm. And you mentioned there was another one.
The other one is called Avalanche.
Got you.
So Storm is based on kind of the natural properties of proof of work. Now it has to adjust some things so that as you're making this progress, like the miners aren't diverging too bad from each other.
Okay.
Like they kind of force them to stay on the same page.
Yeah.
You don't really even need that. Really, just the only thing you need is to publish what you're doing. But Storm actually kind of shepherds them together onto a consensus even before they.
They want to nudge
Yeah.
into agreement.
And so Avalanche says, well, if we can nudge miners towards an agreement, why do we even need them to publish their block hashes? We can just have a system that's very similar to the way Ripple works that actually allows them to vote.
The rounds.
Yeah, so rounds of voting is the idea.
And Stellar is a kind of a fork of Rip. They do that
so
too.
it's the same category of algorithm as those others. So basically the idea is I am a miner, and I see two transactions come in that disagree with each other. They're both trying to send the same money to two different places. So which one of those two do I go with? Well, I have a preference. Whichever one I see first is the one I prefer. But I'll go ask around to my other buddies, right? Hey, which one of these two do you prefer? And I'll look at the majority. So if 60% of people out there are saying transaction A is the one to go with, and I might have preferred B, I'll switch my preference to A because that's what the majority is going with. And then I'll do another round of voting. Well, now 70% prefer A.
And these rounds are pretty rapid.
Yeah,
right?
They can be as rapid as you need. And at some point, everybody is going to kind of converge on either A or B.
Okay, got you. And this what's the key takeaway for a user of Bitcoin Cash?
So what the takeaway of this, both whether it's Storm or Avalanche, is that if I send a transaction, I don't have to wait 10 minutes for it to confirm. I can get good confidence that it will confirm within seconds.
And merchants will be more willing to take that on.
Right, so if I'm a point of sale system at a merchant, I see a transaction come in, I say, okay, is this going to get in a block or is it going to be double spent? That's my big question, right? Because if it gets double spent, I didn't earn the money. And I just start looking, okay, are the miners working on it? Okay, it's probably going to get in. Or did these people vote on it? Then okay, it's probably going to get in.
Got you. So it's a lot of it is keeping that, either not letting the process in between the 10 minutes go to waste,
Right.
or having this other kind of way of voting and rounds and getting a sense of what the other nodes on the network are doing before that
Before it
10
comes
minutes.
through,
So
yeah.
that'll be an interesting debate in the Bitcoin Cash community.
So not only does that solve the scalability issue, because now when that 10-minute block comes out, we don't have to validate the whole block because we've already pre-validated it,
Yeah.
even without the proof of work, right? Because the transaction set is already known.
Got you. Interesting, very interesting.
But now Ripple handles this because one of the problems with an Avalanche system is who gets to decide who are these trusted people who get a vote, because if anybody voted, then you could just cause chaos.
Got you. Yeah, it does. It kind of brings in a pseudo proof of, not
So
proof of stake, but like,
In Stellar and Ripple, it's actually proof of trust.
yeah, it's like, okay, we're like agreeing as these network of nodes
It's like the good old boys network, like
Gotcha.
I'm running a big Ripple node, you're running a big Ripple node, we trust each other because we're big and we know who each other's are.
Which it can work if they stay honest.
Yeah.
Right?
But for
Yeah.
Bitcoin Cash, the way they solve it is they say the people we trust are the last 100 miners to find a block.
And that keeps that work component in there where
Right.
Ripple or Stellar do not have that at all. It's rounds of voting between semi-trusted institutions.
Exactly. So with at least with Bitcoin, it's still that it's like you're not proof of stake. You're not like putting money up where the rich get richer, and it's not proof of trust where you just kind of have a network established. It's actually who did the most proof of work gets the most tickets to vote.
Got you. Yeah, that's one of the cool things about blockchains or any of these networks is really furthering the study of how we come to an agreement, right? And there's a lot of disagreement in the world at any given time, and coming up with systems between people that don't necessarily trust each other and coming to agreement is just huge. And Bitcoin kind of really, I guess, put steroids into that process of figuring out how do we come to an agreement.
Right.
We covered a lot there. We have a user that's asking a questions. Okay, so Charlie G. Hi guys, hello Charlie. I'm in a weird situation. My license is currently suspended and I never had the need for a passport, so I don't have one. What can I do to buy crypto without an ID? All right, so you can use that a lot. You look up like a ATM that's close to your, wherever you live. There's a lot. I think there's a website, Coin ATM Radar, or something like that, where you can go and settle things or buy Bitcoin with cash. And I think there's a lot. I mean, there's ATMs all over the world. If you're in the United States itself, we actually have in the app. You can go to one of our exchange partners, LibertyX, and if you put in your zip code there, it'll take you to one of their locations. It'll either be some type of storefront that sells Bitcoin, or some ATM that'll sell Bitcoin for some type of debit card. And there's also local Bitcoins.
I think local Bitcoins actually requires.
They do that now. They didn't before though.
I think that.
Where you could do no KYC.
I think I actually had to do this the other night because I had to get some records out. But I think they require basic identification in terms of your name, your address, just to kind of use the site.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if they require your license to do trades over a certain, like you can do like $100 or something without a license. So there's a limit there.
Okay, so maybe local, because you
And then,
know better than I
but
do on
think,
that. But I think ATMs are the best avenue right now for no KYC. But like, if you're in Europe, like we just announced at the beginning of the episode, you can use Bity inside the app, which doesn't collect personal information, but you'd need a European bank account to interact with them.
And I would say local Bitcoin is definitely the OG, like peer-to-peer, like way to do it. There's a new upstart one. Roger Rivera runs it. Local.bitcoin.com. So not local Bitcoins. It's local.bitcoin.com. So kind of.
There's also a peer-to-peer exchange, a Bitcoin exchange called Bisq that's been around for a while. It's going to be a little harder to use than a traditional exchange, but you're able to trade on there with no personal identifiable information. So I would definitely look into. I think ATMs would be the easiest, but they're going to be expensive.
So there you go. 5 different options: ATMs, LibertyX, local Bitcoins, local.bitcoins, which is not local Bitcoins, and then Bisq. So.
Yeah, I think those are, and then I would also use the Google machine, right? There might be some other options that we don't currently know about right now. All right, yeah. So we covered a lot. The new release, kind of what's chirping around the chit chat around crypto around the world. Went into some pre-consensus kind of instant confirmation stuff being development done on Bitcoin Cash. So we covered.
What's new with Edge? I mean, I think our CEO Paul is currently traveling. He's in Europe right now.
That's true. Oh yeah, and he's talking to investors out there as well, because we are actually raising money on a crowdfunding platform in the UK for. I guess, it's going to be non-U.S. investors, non-U.S. accredited investors can invest in our platform. But we're working to open it up to the United States. We are. But right now it's just for accredited investors outside of the United States due to regulations.
So it's Bank to the Future. So
yeah, banktothefuture.com. If you're interested, you can invest in our platform there.
So we're not selling an ICO. We're selling actual ownership in the company.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is kind of weird in this space. Actually do a traditional security.
Well, I think that's all the time we have.
Yep.
That's a beautiful day out. We're going to get some work done here, and then hopefully go out before it gets dark. Enjoy it. Enjoy your fall. Enjoy your Friday. Peace.
Not your keys, not your coins.